So that should be up there for everyone.
Yep, we
Looks
see it.
great.
Awesome. All right. So the topic of my project was proposing an increase to RIT Ambulance's fleet size. I'm currently the chief of operations over there, so it's kind of a bit of a passion project for me, but also pretty relevant to what I'm doing. So just a brief overview of kind of the purpose and goals for this project. We wanted to investigate and officially propose the acquisition of a second transporting ambulance for RIT Ambulance. We wanted to move through proposal life cycle with multiple kind of levels of review, and then hopefully achieve either approval of the proposal or next steps, or if it's denied, any next steps after that or lessons learned. So we'll start off very quickly with just a brief overview of what RIT Ambulance is to get some kind of background and some kind of understanding of where we're coming from. So we actually started in 1968, right when we moved to the Henrietta campus, but we didn't acquire our first ambulance until 1981. And then we acquired a second vehicle in 1989, and we haven't really expanded since then. It's primarily a student leadership organization, all volunteers as well. There's no paid positions, and we provide comprehensive emergency pre-hospital care, and then also medical event support service or standby service to the campus community. We're actually the first registered ambulance in Monroe County, New York. And we were also one of the first collegiate ambulance agencies. This is just our mission here, which I won't go through each bullet point, but essentially it's to provide EMS services to the campus at no charge to support our community. And that's done through a few different pillars, primarily through education, training, promoting student leadership, and then volunteerism. We have two primary services. The EMS calls themselves, which is where someone calls 911 on campus or public safety, we get dispatched. And ideally, we want to respond to all of these calls with our transporting ambulance, and we don't charge for any of these services. Whereas our standbys, they're pre-scheduled. We do charge a small fee for those, and therefore kind of all different types of things on campus. Commencement, when there's a ton of students on campus and families, it's required by law just because of the number of attendees that we have a transporting ambulance there. But then there's also some smaller events like Quidditch tournament or club lacrosse team where they just want to have an EMT kind of standing there in case something goes really, really wrong. And then I'm not going to read through these slides really, just to give you an idea of what our fleet currently is. We have one transporting ambulance, which is 6359. That's the only vehicle that we can actually transport patients in. It operates at the basic life support level, which means we don't have all the fancy drugs, but we can still save a life when we show up. And then DFib 63, which is our fly car. It's basically a quick response vehicle used for command. It's also used a lot for standbys that don't require a transporting ambulance, and we cannot move patients in it by law. That said, more onto the actual proposal itself. So RIT is a growing community with expanding needs. I mean, we hear every year it's largest freshman class or second largest freshman class. It actually would have been the largest freshman class this year if they didn't decrease our admit rate. So it's kind of a good thing they did that because we don't have enough housing. But the point being is as our community grows, our needs of the community expand as well. And RIT is also currently running a campaign called Transforming RIT with 4 different pillars. And pillar 2 is really enhancing the student experience. This text here is taken directly from their website, but it's essentially one of the points of the campaign is to enhance the student experience and broaden opportunities for experiential education, which RIT Ambulance is one of them. through community service, projects, student leadership, and student development. All of our members at some point will gain their emergency medical technician certification or other state or federal certifications. So it's a very important aspect of development of our members, but also enhancing the student experience for the community because we provide these services for our students free of charge. Of course, if anyone has questions or if something seems you just want clarification on something in the middle of it, feel free to stop me, but there's also going to be time for questions at the end. So we can see that demand on our campus is increasing. For example, 3 out of the 3 months out of the last academic year, we had our highest call volume in the past 10 years. Most notably September, where we had over 100 calls, emergency calls for service, not standby events. And some of that's reflected here on this chart. You can see how this is by month to month for just 2 months, how it's been steadily increasing over the years. You'll notice that big dip in 2020, we didn't really have students on campus due to the pandemic. And then from this increased volume, you get more instances where our transporting ambulance is not able to respond. And there could be multiple reasons for that. It's busy on another call, it's on a standby, or there's not a crew available for it. And that happened at least 96 times this last fiscal year. Now, we'll still respond in all of these situations if we can, either with our fly car or a first responder, which is just a EMT in their own vehicle with medical equipment. But students will receive a bill from another agency because we need to send a transporting unit to every call. And if ours isn't available, we'll have to send a local ambulance service like CHS, which is the ambulance service for the Henrietta area. Furthermore, our standby requests are increasing. Looking at our average number of standby requests, it's gone up 37% in the past year. We also started supporting the Division I women's hockey team. We've always supported the men's team. We were never requested for the women's team in the past, but this past year, their athletic trainer, or their head athletic trainer, basically said to us, every school in the league has been doing this and we never requested it from you. Can you support it? And we gave them the answer of yes. The caveat with that is on days with hockey games, that means our transporting ambulance is held up for 8 to 9 hours on that day. And that's 8 to 9 hours that we can't respond to other calls on campus. And of course, Fridays and Saturdays, when most of the games are, that's also the highest call volume days for us. Additionally, other agencies in the county are denying standby requests because of staffing issues. And that's kind of something we've been seeing nationwide in all healthcare fields. There's just not enough people. If we, for some reason, can't use our transporting vehicle, we'll use our non-transporting units. So DFib 63, like I mentioned before, or first responders. And we'll use them, like I said, to avoid dedicating our transporting unit when we don't need to have the physical ambulance there. But overall, the standbys are a financial benefit for us and the institution. Last year, they brought in over $22,000 in revenue. And our rates are competitive with other agencies in the county. And you can see on the bottom there, AMR, which is the agency that provides ambulance services for the city of Rochester, they charge 83% more for their standby services, CHS 91%, and Monroe Ambulance 131% more. So we're saving the Institute a ton of money by providing these services. And we don't charge the students themselves for any of the services that we provide on a standby. That said, great, demand's going up, but can you actually support it? And that's one of the #1 questions we get anytime we're looking at another ambulance is, do we have the staffing to support another vehicle? And the answer is yes. So over the past 4 years that are denoted here, this is a number of clearances per academic year. Clearance means someone's finished their training program. And you can see that it's been steadily increasing with that trend line there over the past 4 years. And kind of our main roadblock to training is with only one ambulance, you can't really have 3 people drive the ambulance at once. You could try, probably wouldn't end too well. Maybe someone's sitting on someone's lap or not a fun time. So we can't really train as many people as quickly as we'd like to because of that. And you could say, oh, well, they can drive another car, but an ambulance is a lot bigger. Some people aren't really used to driving a vehicle that size, so they really need the time behind the seat of behind the wheel of an ambulance to really get good at it. Additionally, every year, our minimum combined volunteer hours that are required is about 5,200 hours. Cleared members have to do 20 hours a month, trainees do 10. And in addition to that, during COVID, one service that we provided is we were moving a bunch of students that didn't have their own transportation on campus to isolation and quarantine. And volunteers dedicated an additional 835 hours to that, transporting over 680 students back and forth between isolation and quarantine. So from that, we can say that really the dedication of our volunteers has only increased over the pandemic. Another thing we looked at for this proposal is our peer schools. So our IT lists a number of schools as peer schools, and we wanted to look at their collegiate EMS programs and see where we stood up compared to their call volume and their fleet size. And what we found from that is that RIT basically is not comparable or competitive with our peers. We have the worst ratio of EMS calls per transporting unit, which basically means we can't consistently provide transport as well as some other schools can. And in calls per fleet vehicle, we were not the worst, but almost the worst. And that's kind of indicating our ability to consistently provide emergency medical services in general. And both of those are a problem. This kind of reviews what I just went over, but basically increased unit availability at peer universities allows for more consistent service to their communities, and we cannot provide that consistent service without an additional transporting vehicle. For some background in terms of healthcare, there's a nationwide crisis. Many area hospitals are seeing vacancy rates as high as 60%, particularly in nursing. And local ambulance agencies are running below minimum staffing levels. What that means for us is it takes us longer to offload patients at hospitals. If our unit's not available, another ambulance may be responding sometimes as far away as Hilton. If you're familiar with the geography of the area, that's about a 25-minute drive. And with only one transporting vehicle, we can't really compensate for that.
John, you've got 3 or 4 more minutes, please.
Perfect. Finishing right up. Got a couple more slides here. So we've also are seeing supply chain and manufacturing shortages. Basically, if our vehicle dies, we're not getting another one for a while. Some vehicle manufacturers, there's delays of 2 to 3 years just to get vehicles. So if our vehicle goes out of service, we're basically out of service as a transporting ambulance. With that in mind, our recommendation is pursuing the donation of a second transporting ambulance to the RIT community. A quick overview of costs for that, relatively insignificant recurring costs, not more than $3,000 a year. And that highly depends on the usage of the vehicle in terms of supplies and fuel. And then minimum startup costs with really the only capital purchase being a stretcher system. But overall, just a quick summary of the benefits. It allows us to provide a more reliable and vital service to the RIT community. It handles our increased call volume and increased standby requests. It guarantees that we have continuity during periods of vehicle maintenance, whether planned or unplanned, especially if something breaks. It helps us get more people through our training process because we have more training availability. And finally, it supports the draw of prospective students to RIT for our wellness and student life services. I don't know the last time anyone took a campus tour, but we are on the tour. And it's always something that gets pointed out every time students walk by the Student Health Center. And then just a quick overview of where the proposal stands. These are the kind of steps it's gone through. And essentially, we're at the very end of the approval process, in that the proposal has been approved. The only challenge that we've come up with is basically they decided, you know, this is great. We should get a second ambulance. We should also get a new base, which that's a multi-million-dollar project, which they're kind of trying to figure out if they're going to ask for both at once or do separate campaigns for the two of them. But with that, is there any questions?
Thanks, John. Well, I'm convinced. So you've also managed to convince Jim Waters. Is that what that second level of administrative review is?
Second level was head of student wellness.
Okay.
So next step is Sandy Johnson.
So thank you very much. Very detailed and very clear presentation. You said that everybody's a volunteer. It sounds like you've got to be full-time, right? I mean,
I work full-time in a different role, but all of the RIT ambulance roles are completely volunteer. My full-time role is with marketing and communications in engineering.
So on the side, you direct this whole operation?
Yes.
Wow. Wow. So let me see. I had a couple of questions here. How do you select your volunteers?
There's a application process because we'd love to accept everyone, but we usually get about 40 to 50 applications every semester, and we just don't have the training capacity for that. So there's just a short application and kind of interview process.
So it's by interview. So you're the interviewer. So you're looking for a certain set of skills and attitudes.
Yeah.
Do you have deaf volunteers?
We do to some extent. Unfortunately, New York State has a requirement that to work on an ambulance, you need to be able to effectively communicate on a two-way radio. So if you're able to communicate on the radio, if you have cochlear implants or a hearing aid and you can hear and understand a radio, then you're fine. But otherwise, state regulations say that you can't work on an ambulance. So we have alternative roles that allow people to still volunteer and give back to the community, but they can't be involved with the patient care portion of it.
Do you train your volunteers to sign, or at least some of them?
We have sign and ASL classes, mostly like crisis interpreting, that we offer to our members. But the fantastic thing about RIT is anytime there's an emergency on campus, they'll also summon a emergency interpreter to the scene as well.
Right. Yeah, of course. So last question. You said that the number of calls is increasing, not exponentially, but dramatically, as far as I could tell from your graph there. That can't be just because we have more students on campus. I mean, how do you explain the increase in addition to the fact that we have more students?
It's challenging because there's really not just one thing that can correlate to it. More population can certainly have something to do with it. But for example, like Purdue has over 20,000 students on campus, but their EMS call volume is nowhere near that high. Whereas RIT, we have about 16,000 students that work on this campus, plus staff and faculty, where our call volume for years, the average has been around 700. So campus climate, students, like the current students, how used they are to being away from home, how comfortable they are being on their own, because a lot of the calls that we get are, I didn't know who else to call, so I called an ambulance. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but sometimes it's just, well, yeah, you fell and sprained your ankle. You can still walk. You can go to the health center in the morning. You don't need necessarily to call 911 and go to the hospital. So it really depends. It's very hard to say.
Interesting. That's quite different then from Purdue. I wonder. So is that something that student affairs looks into and tries to improve the ratio? Do you know?
We provide annual reports to them every year. And some of our data has assisted with some campus initiatives. For example, if you noticed on the crosswalks on campus, those flashing signs that went up past couple of years, that was based off of a study that public safety did for pedestrian safety. And they got data from us on how many motor vehicle collisions there are on campus, particularly with pedestrians, how many students were wearing helmets that were involved, how many were bicyclists, etc. So our data is occasionally used for improving the campus community.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Meg?
Okay. Thanks, Stephen. So John, I thought that was just really nicely done and really well organized, and as Stephen mentioned, easy to follow. So my question actually is in the same realm as Stephen's, and you did start to answer it. The peak where we're seeing just like the dramatic increase in calls, are a lot of those mental health calls?
This year, no. At the moment, there are certainly years when, yes, it's incredibly bad. We usually see spikes, as you might expect, around finals time and also freshman orientation, first time away from home kind of syndrome. A majority of our calls are actually traumatic injury, which is, sports injury, sprained ankle, dislocated shoulder.
Okay. And I don't think you answered this, but how often is this data provided to Sandy Johnson or other administration officials where they can kind of take this into consideration, not just in how it impacts, a proposal like yours, but really, I think it speaks to just kind of the campus wellness as a whole. So I'm curious how often they're reviewing that data.
Sure. It's annually. It's reported as part of the department's annual reports at the end of the year. So of course, financials and other things are included in that, but at the end of every fiscal year, so end of June, every department in wellness provides an annual report that I don't know for sure, but I'm certain ends up at least on around Sandy's desk, if not directly on it.
Okay. All right, great. Well, I have lots more questions. Stephen and I need to rein in the number of questions too, because we're almost at the halfway mark, Stephen, and we've only got one person down. So we'll go ahead and move on. Ella, you are up next. Nice job, John.
Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
I can see you, but I can't see your presentation.
Oh, how's that?
Now it's not in presentation mode, but I can see this. There, now you go. There you go. Okay, good.
Okay. So, hi, my name is Ella Muir, and my project is called Reflections and Daydreams. So for my project, I've created a book composed of a collection of photographs and poetry. This book symbolizes a reflection of my life by giving me a way to look back on my fondest memories through moments I've captured with my camera. This book is also a way to showcase how my photography and poetry skills have progressed throughout the course of this project. For me, this is a passion project since it does not relate to my major of echocardiography. Despite this, I personally feel that photography and echocardiography are connected in the sense that they both demonstrate their own unique technique of taking photographs. For example, like with a camera, you have to adjust the focus and the depth of field, whereas in echocardiography, you also have to adjust those settings on the ultrasound machine to get the highest quality picture. I wanted to include the two photos on this slide that are the most crucial tools I use for this project, which are my Canon Rebel T6 camera and my journal. So when I started this project, I wanted to have a clear theme or purpose that would be conveyed through my photos. I chose to select photos from the most memorable periods of my life, which are my trip to California in 2019, my experience at Monroe Community College from 2019 to 2021, and my most recent experience at RIT from 2021 to 2022. So I was inspired by the photography of David Noyes, Mark Simons, and William Eggleston, and the poetry of Pablo Neruda. So starting with David Noyes, he was a traveling photographer who was actually my professor for an introduction to digital photography class at MCC. Unfortunately, midway through the course, he passed away, but his vision and love for photography that were conveyed through his teaching continues to inspire me. I chose to dedicate my book to David because I wouldn't be the photographer I am today without all of the skills and techniques that I learned from his class. At the end of the semester, David's wife gave everyone in my class a copy of his book, which was following through with his intentions for all of us. The book is called The Photographing Tourist, A Storyteller's Guide to Travel and Photography. I'm so grateful that I was given this book and that I have this amazing collection of photos from places all over the world. So Mark Simons is another photographer whose work I admire. I was inspired by his book called Southeast that was made in the early 2000s. I loved the minimalist layout of the book and how all of the photos were in black and white, and they all had like clean white borders. So William Eggleston is an American photographer known for his use of color and finding beauty in the mundane. His book called The Democratic Forest is one of my favorites because it's just full of photos of nature and everyday moments that have been brought to life by his unique perspective. Now, Pablo Neruda is a Chilean poet who's well known for his love poems. I was first introduced to his work in my high school literature class with his poem, Every Day You Play. The beauty of his poetry is conveyed through his strong emotions and passion, which are what I believe to be key factors in writing a successful poem. When I'm writing the majority of my poems, I find that it is most helpful to use love and raw emotion to guide me. So first, I wanted to explain my background in photography. Starting with high school, I was in a film photography class where this was where I first learned how to use a camera, how to use like the manual focus option and how to develop film using the darkroom. Even though this was a film photography class, the skills that I learned were foundational in photography, and I feel that they really helped me start on the right path. Next, I took a digital photography class at MCC that I had mentioned previously with David Noyes, where I learned how to use the automatic focusing option and how to construct an image using the principles of photography, such as rule of thirds, balancing, use of color. I also learned how to edit images using software such as Lightroom and Photoshop. And at RIT this past year, I took another digital photography class to continue my learning experience. And in this class, there were many assignments and projects where I had to take photos that demonstrated the principles of photography and also photos that conveyed a certain theme or topic, which I hadn't done before. This allowed me to utilize my knowledge and skills from my previous courses to show my progression and how I've become a better photographer. So to begin the photography aspect of my project, I started with selecting 48 of my most meaningful photos, which I felt were the ones that I could feel the emotion and the passion behind them. After I chose my photos, I began editing them using Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop. So I organized my photos in sequential order by date, starting with California. My photos in California were taken in places like San Francisco, Chinatown, Alameda, and Santa Cruz. Next, my photos from MCC were taken in my hometown of Hilton, New York, and also in Rochester. And during my time at RIT, I took a lot of photos around campus and also in downtown Rochester. And as you can see in this photo, one of the most important first steps I took in this photography aspect was to organize my photos onto my computer because I wanted to visualize the layout and make sure that they were all cohesive. So I included a couple of photos from the California portion of my book. At this time in my life, I had just graduated from high school and I was becoming interested in traveling and experiencing the beauty of places outside of my small hometown. I was grateful to be out of my comfort zone and in a place of diverse culture. These photos are from the MCC portion of my book. At this point in my life, I was experiencing my first semester of college and I was learning so much about myself and what I wanted to do with my future career as a stenographer. My brother Avon is showcased multiple times in this portion of the book, and I was lucky to have him be a part of this process. The photo on the bottom of the reflection of the sunset in the water is what I chose as for the cover of my book because I felt that it displayed my style and interest in nature as a photographer. And these last two photos are two of my favorite photos from the RIT portion of my book. They're both taken in downtown Rochester, which for me is a place filled with a lot of special memories. These photos were from the last assignment in my spring photography class, and the theme of my project was finding beauty in the mundane. So the arrangement of my photos was a crucial part of this process. For me, it was imperative that I chose photos that were placed beside each other that were cohesive and that displayed compatible color schemes, palettes, and hues. The theme or tone of the images are also key factors because I wanted the reader to be able to feel an emotion through the connection between the two photos on either page. I also took note of the orientation of the photos, particularly whether they were landscape or portrait. So for the top two photos on the slide, I chose them to be placed side by side because they both display a muted color palette with the greens and the reds, and they also both have shadows and a pronounced light source, which I feel gives them a similar mood. For the bottom two photos, I felt that they both revealed a bright blue color scheme. They have hints of vibrant green and pronounced leading lines, which help form like a defined structure in both of the images. So for this project, I wanted to add something special to make it unique compared to the standard photography book. As I mentioned previously, the poem Every Day You Play by Pablo Neruda is one of my favorite poems, and it inspired me to write my own. The line from this poem that resonates with me the most is, "I will bring you happy flowers from the mountains, bluebells, dark hazels, and rustic baskets of kisses." I remember reading this line for the first time in high school and feeling that connection and sentiment you feel when you're truly moved by something. And it was, as if my worries or anxieties went away for that short period of time that I was reading it. I did some research on poetry and I discovered an article that provided scientific evidence showing how expressive writing has been proven to have psychological benefits. And I know this is true from my own personal experience with creative writing because expressing myself and my emotions has been an important part of my life and my routine to decompress and help reduce my anxiety. So to start my poetry portion of this book, I selected specific photos that inspired me to write 8 different poems. I began the brainstorming process by writing drafts in my journal and making edits to those drafts in pencil so that I could look back at my progress and remove any edits if I needed to. I decided to write a haiku for one of my poems, which prompted me to research the structure and the meaning behind writing a successful haiku. I found an article that described the structure as 5 words in the first line, 7 words in the second, and 5 words in the third line. Because haikus have such a small amount of words, it's important to focus on a single image or thought. I ended up choosing the picture that I took in the slide of the downtown of an abandoned ticket booth that was covered in graffiti. I chose this as the muse for my haiku. I struggled the most with creating this poem because I love using descriptive words to provide imagery, but I had to choose my words very carefully for this poem, so it was a little bit challenging. I wanted to read the poem for you guys. It goes like this. Seafoam memories mask translucent enclosures, an abandoned hideaway engulfed in forgotten stillness. I wonder where they escaped. So I wanted to include some more photos from my book and some examples of my poetry, brainstorming and editing process. The top 2 photos are from the RIT portion of my book. The poem that corresponds to the photo of the leaf on the left is called June, and it describes a perpetual longing for summer. The poem next to the photo of the plants on the top is called Dancing Trees, and it reflects a story of someone whose beauty lies on the inside. And I also wanted to share this, the finished poem with you all because it's one of my favorites that I wrote, and I have it in my book here. It's called Dancing Trees. Harmoniously chanting to me, I hear the sweet mellow hum of the dancing trees, painting stories with strokes of wind. From afar, a straw-like scene of brittle bones repels its beholders. Inside, they bloom wildly, with raw emerald eyes and rose quartz lips, a hidden aroma of sugary maple drops, an encounter meant only for those who hear the sweet song of the dancing trees. So let's go back to this. The bottom 2 photos are pictures from my trip to California. The picture on the left is of the Under the Bridge skate park in San Francisco. And the poem that aligns with that is called Prism of Nostalgia, and it describes the sublimity of childhood. And the last photo is of another skate park. This one is in Alameda, and it inspired my poem called Gilded Yellow, which describes the process of accepting myself for who I am and acknowledging that the uniqueness of beauty lies within insecurities and flaws. So I wanted to include an example of my poetry progression. So writing poetry sometimes results in completely starting over and scrapping the original idea or the theme. An example of this can be seen with this poem that I titled Mysterious Skin. I decided to keep some of the imagery I had in the original, but I started over by coming up with a completely different title and theme. For this photo, I felt that the original poem's tone didn't align with the warm and intimate tone of this photo. I decided to write about a moment of revelation and insight to utilize symbolism for the captivating light that shines on the curtain in the photo.
Ella, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. So once I had finished editing and finalizing my photos and poems, I began the process of creating the actual product, which was the book. One of the steps I took was to reach out to a previous student to get their perspective on the website they used to create their book. I decided to follow through with their advice and start importing my photos into the self-publishing platform called Blurb. Blurb was the perfect for me because it was an affordable, professional quality, easy to use website with a wide range of book styles to choose from. Next, I downloaded the software called Bookwrite, and this allowed me to select the style, format, size of my book, but once I exported my photos from Lightroom and Photoshop with high quality specifications, I began importing them into Bookwrite and sorting them by date. I also ended up choosing the paper type after careful consideration of research on the best type for professional photo books, which proved to be premium luster. So here's the final product. I also have it with me here. The majority of my photos were taken in landscape orientation, so I felt that a landscape book design would demonstrate most aesthetically pleasing layout. I chose black as my cover color in white text because I really wanted my photo to stand out against the dark background. So as a result of this course, I feel that I have made major improvements in my time management skills. This is the first time in my college experience that it has been my full responsibility to maintain productivity within a course without like the framework of a detailed schedule with due dates. Most of the courses I've taken have constant assignments and requirements that provide me with a schedule to enhance my productivity and time management. So to participate in this course was something I had to adjust to in order to do well. For the majority of this summer course, I was also balancing a full-time schedule and high-level weekly reading requirements for my echocardiography program. But having all these responsibilities truly guided me to push myself and create my own schedule and accomplish goals every week to stay on track. I feel that by doing so, I learned how to use my time more efficiently and complete tasks with a more developed plan. I wanted to share how grateful I am for being given this opportunity to reflect on my time as a photographer before I start my clinical internship with RIT this upcoming school year. And I'm very appreciative of this project for helping me look at my skills outside of my major and express myself in my passion for creativity. And my works cited page. And does anyone have any questions?
Meg, would you like to go first?
I would love to. Wow, Ella, that was really great. Obviously, this is a deeply personal project, but I really, really appreciated the integration of the learning and the emotions and all the different techniques. There were so many things that you included in this, which was really nice and really gave us a really holistic picture of the experience. Stephen and I obviously love to hear that it was good for you for skill building and for learning how to do something entirely on your own, because that is the objective. Even though it is marginally uncomfortable for students to not have the normal guardrails that a more traditional class will have. And I am going to get to a question here, but you know, this is actually what the world of work looks like. So it's really great that you were reflecting on that and appreciating that those are skills that you're flexing right now. So really nice job. What was the most difficult part of all of this? There were so many pieces and you did a really nice job of reflecting on the learning, but maybe where did the most learning take place, or what made you the most uncomfortable or was the most difficult?
I would have to say designing the book and using although like the software, the blurb software was really easy to use, I had no idea how much time it takes to like really design a book and all the different factors that go into it. So I definitely have to say that was the most challenging thing for me. But by the end of it, like of designing it, I definitely got the hang of it and it was really fun, actually. Yeah.
Good. And my last question, and I think I know the answer, but what do you think about the final result?
I really like it. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so some of them, like when I was looking through the photos, like they weren't what I had envisioned, like quality wise, but I am really happy with how it turned out as a whole, and just being able to see it in person is very exciting.
Good. And just a final comment. So I hope that you filled out the funding piece so that we can reimburse you for that. And then we'll obviously want to order a couple copies for the office. So just something to think about.
Okay.
Okay,
Awesome.
nice job. Stephen.
I'm not surprised that you admit to being a perfectionist. That was the impression. So you have one copy, and what's the deal with the copies here? Did you just made one copy?
Yeah, so I just made one copy. I wanted to make sure that it looked right before I started like ordering more of them. But I'm definitely gonna, start ordering a couple to hand out to like family and stuff. But yeah.
So this would be an example of self-publishing, I mean, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And that PDF link on, I think almost your last slide.
Yeah.
You submitted that, right? So I can click on that from your slides that you
Yes.
submitted before. Okay.
And I also just put it in the chat if anyone wanted to
Oh,
copy
great.
that.
Oh, great.
And, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I will look at that. So I only have one question, because when a project is so personal and subjective, as opposed to something that's sort of, engineering based or more scientific, it's a little more difficult to come up with questions because, it's you put yourself into it. So, questions don't arise quite so easily. But I do have a question. You mentioned at the beginning, you try to draw a parallel or at least a connection between echocardiography and the camera photography, right? So can you expand on that a little bit? I mean, you're going to do your clinical year. You're going to be presumably you're going to go ahead and that's what your first career is going to be. Where does this project fit with that, or is it entirely separate?
I think it's separate, but I feel like if I were to, pursue photography as like another like a side job or a hobby, in my future, it would be a really valuable asset to have, like having this book so that I can, it sort of motivates me to continue photography. But, regarding like my career as an echocardiographer, it doesn't really help me.
Right. I can see, given how you've described your summer, that you could probably pursue two careers at the same time.
Yeah.
Anyway, I really enjoyed your presentation. It was great. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll go to George.
All right. Let me just bring this up real quick. And we'll get it started. I am George Stollsteimer, and my project is titled An Exploration of Wearable Robotics. So, back in the fall of 2021, I was talking with a friend of mine, and this friend of mine is very into costume design. And we were talking about some of his plans for, what he wants to do with that in the future. And he had mentioned particularly wanting to design a costume based around this character in the bottom right from a popular video game series named Midna. This character, as you can see, is not human and has and the ability to control their hair as sort of a prehensile limb. And he was kind of lamenting this because he's very particular with how he likes to design these costumes, and he wanted something that wouldn't just be a static piece for it. And so, I suggested potentially taking that idea further by designing a robotic arm that would be wearable for him to use and control in the costume. The major problems with this is that it obviously has to be safe to wear and safe to wear for extended periods of time potentially. So it has to be light, and we have to try and maximize the versatility of its movements without requiring too much of his interaction. Because if he's just standing there manipulating it with his hands, it kind of ruins the effect. So initial thoughts for this were potentially incorporating a neurotechnology implementation, either through EEG or brainwaves, or EMG, which are muscle impulses. It also couldn't be tethered to an external controller power source because he would need to be able to move around with it. And I would have to try and maximize the battery life despite this. So we came to the conclusion that we wanted to do a 3D printed skeleton, as it would likely allow me to maximize the strength to weight ratio of the arm itself. That would end up being attached to a helmet. And I wanted to incorporate motorized joints that could be controlled remotely using a standard commercial microcontroller, either a Teensy 4.0 or an Arduino Uno. And at this point, we hadn't really settled on a control system yet, but that was something that we could figure out later. I promise this is the most text dense slide in the entire presentation, and I'm not going to go over all of this, but there was a lot of research that I had to do in order to bring all of these different parts together successfully. The main thing was that curiosity about the neurotech aspect of it. I immediately tried looking into the feasibility of this. And I looked at a lot of existing projects. And what I found was that for the the brainwave processing side of this, EEG, most projects controlling a physical robot used frequency-based visual stimuli. So they have different icons flashing at different rates. And when you look at one of those icons, your brain sends certain signals out because it recognizes the rate at which it's flashing, and the machine can process that information. So the equipment and techniques used to do this are extremely complex and often very, very expensive. And I am a college student. I cannot afford many thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars in equipment to be able to do that. So that's out. And the practical implementation of EMG control would have really restricted my ability to make its movement complex in any way. I would have likely had to combine that control method with something else as well in order to, get the complexity that I was looking for, and that would just make it harder to use for the end user. So unfortunately, neurotech for this particular project did not seem like a feasible implementation. I looked over tons of different information for the electronics of it, particularly the different motors I could choose from, as well as the different microcontrollers. Ultimately, I settled on an MG996R for the servos in the arm, and an AR3606HB for the motor in the base that could rotate continuously. And I also selected an Arduino for its ease of use, because this object will not be mine forever. I also did a lot of research into the physical aspects of 3D printing and how to effectively maximize strength to weight ratio, as well as what material I should use. In this case, PLA was selected as it is the easiest to work with, has a very good strength to weight ratio, and also is entirely safe to be exposed to for long periods of time, completely biodegradable, and just an all-around very, very good material to use. So the physical design of the arm was done in Autodesk Fusion 360 and printed on a FlashForge Dreamer. The final design consists of 18 different part files, amongst which there were a total of 94 different design iterations for all of the different parts. The knuckles are PLA welded, which, as far as I could find, is not a very common practice. I had initially looked into it to see if it would work in the first place, because I wasn't sure. And I could not find documentation of anybody doing that. So I just kind of tried it, and it worked very well. And in total, it's about 2.5 feet long and around 3 pounds. The electronics, I have over here a list of the major parts that I used. And on the right side here is a diagram of the circuit itself. You have the power supply on the left that goes into a voltage regulator to power the 5 servos that you see there. And a pack of 4 AA's that is powering the Arduino Uno, which acts as the brain for the system, and the HC05 Bluetooth unit, which is what I ended up deciding on for how to control the device. And so that leads us into the programming and app design of the project. These are some important snippets from the program from the Arduino, which is used to process the signals that it receives and interpret what to do when it receives those signals. I won't go through all of this, but here at the top is top center is the initial setup for the system. That only runs once. And then the other 3, starting with the left, bottom left photo and going across to the right, is all program blocks of programming that is in the loop section of the Arduino code, which is essentially a set of functions that continuously run over and over and over again until the device is powered off. The app itself, I have never done app design before, so that this was particularly tricky, at least at the beginning. But I discovered a very, very helpful tool for app design provided free by MIT called MIT App Inventor, which allows a more visual approach to designing an application. Up here on the top, you can see the visual designer, which allowed me to essentially position all the different buttons and controls how I wanted them to be. And then in the bottom left is the program blocks side of the platform, which is essentially going deeper into how these controls and buttons interact and what signals to send out when a command is given, etc. And then on the bottom right is a screenshot directly from my phone of the finished app running. It is, as you can see, currently not connected to the rest of the system, but later you will see a demonstration of it actually running. So I had my roommate record a demo video of the device actually operating, but my roommate has an iPhone, so it recorded it in .mov format, which PowerPoint really doesn't like. So I'm going to, as long as it's okay with you, I'm going to shift over to VLC Media Player as far as sharing my screen goes, in order to show you guys this video. All right. So, Capstone. Here we go. Can you hear this? The audio? Okay.
I can't.
All right. Well, then we're gonna. I don't really know how to share audio.
When you share your screen, on the bottom of the window that pops up, there's a checkbox to optimize for video and to share audio.
Here we go. Let's do this again then, real quick. Okay. Optimize for it. Thank you. All right.
And filming.
So, how's about
This
now?
is the demo video for the finished arm. Electronics is slightly temperamental sometimes, so we'll see how this goes. I'm not using the best equipment in the world, so inconsistencies are sometimes an issue. But so we've got the Arduino acting as the brain for the system, and the HC05 Bluetooth unit for picking up the signals from the control app that I designed. A power source for the Bluetooth unit and the Arduino. The voltage regulator, which is to prevent anything from burning out, any of the motors from burning out because of the RC battery that I'm using to power all of them. And so we're going to hit connect here and select the HC05. And we're now connected. So the arm is able to rotate at its base in both directions. There's one direction, and there's the other. I'm not going to rotate it too much to prevent everything from getting all twisted up right now. The fingers can open and close. Sometimes one of the joints gets a little stuck, and I just got to give it a tap. I got to sand that down so that it'll go on its own, and then we can reopen. And I can adjust the speed at which it does that. See, there it goes again. Pointer finger. Got to sand it down. Yep, just like that. And then the wrist can rotate in both directions. I'm going to hold this down because this is supposed to be strapped to a helmet, but obviously it is not. It is just freestanding right now, so it is not the most stable thing in the world. And we can rotate the other way. Whoop. And then we'll rotate back this way. And then we'll show the elbow motion. Whoa! Oh, I left the speed on too high. There we go. Let's reduce that. I'm going to limit that probably for safety reasons. But then we can go in the opposite direction, slower now. And each joint has a 180-degree range of motion. However, at the moment, the hand is slightly too heavy, which I will be working on in future iterations. So the shoulder range of motion is slightly limited. I can't go all the way to one side or the other. Otherwise, it will be too heavy for the motor to lift. See, like here, I just got to give it a little bit of help.
Like my frozen shoulder.
Back to its own position. And then back over this way. There you go. Again, not the most reliable electronics. And then back over to the other side. Just like that. And then I can hit the home button here to return everything to an upright position. And again, I'm going to have to help the shoulder just slightly.
George, can you finish up in 1 minute?
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna speed this up a little bit.
Then I've implemented into the control app is a programmable routine feature. So for example, if I save this position, I now have one position saved, and let's say we want it to wave hello, I can bring the wrist down. Oh, it's the wrong direction, but whatever. I'm still getting used to my own control app. And then we'll save that one. So save position save 2. And then we'll bring it back towards the center. Oh, that's finger flexion. I pressed the wrong thing. There we go. We'll bring it back to the center. And say that position and bring it towards Are we running low on battery? We might be running low on battery. But if I hit run now, it should just automatically alternate between those positions, or cycle through all of the saved positions, and should continue to do so. Yeah, I think we are.
There it
oh,
is.
There we go. We're running a little low on battery, so things are getting a little sluggish. And it will continue to do so until I press the reset button, at which point it will stop the routine and clear the array that stores all the positions. Although it will finish the last loop. So it'll go through this one last loop, and then it will stop repeating that motion sequence.
Okay, and then the last couple seconds of the video are just me explaining that that process can be done with all of the joints except for the one at the base. But you can still rotate the arm while it's performing a programmed routine at the base. It's just you can't save positions of rotation. But yeah, that's essentially the overall functionality of the arm in practice. There are some things that I would like to be better, and I'm working on making them better. But overall, I'm fairly pleased with how it functions. Unfortunately, I have not yet been able to test it with the end user, Ash, because they are not currently in New York State. They will be coming in September in order for me to try out the system with them here. And have it properly mounted. But given its weight of just about 3 pounds, and how it feels to hold it when it's operating, we believe that it should pose no issues being used while being worn. But we shall see. Do you guys have any questions?
Yes, yes, George. So one of the great things about this course, from my perspective, and I imagine from Meg's perspective, is that we get the most bizarre projects that you can imagine.
Yeah.
And some of them, I don't mean that to be negative. They're just amazing projects, bizarre in an amazing way.
Oh yeah.
I think yours fits that category. So great job. As you went through your explanations, I was trying to think, are you a mechanical engineer, a computer engineer, electrical engineer? What sort of engineer are you?
Kind of all of them. I think if I had to put a label on it, I would probably most identify with either electromechanical engineering or biomedical engineering.
Biomedical, okay.
As like I said, I do, because of my SOIS degree in particular, I do now have a good bit of background in neurotechnology, which is fundamentally both electrical and biomedical, kind of intertwined.
Sure.
But yeah.
So were it not for the exorbitant expense, you probably would have gone with the neuro approach, right?
I would have certainly liked to. There are some more like highly detailed electromyography systems, like muscle impulse systems, that I could have used if I had the funds, that would have been feasible for use with a single end user. The thing about electroencephalography, or brainwave detection and processing, is that it requires, just by the nature of it, it requires the training of a machine learning algorithm in order to interpret, which requires a data set, which means that I would have to essentially have access to Ash for long periods of time, essentially gathering data from him directly, yeah, and building a data set from that in order to train the algorithm, which would have certainly been possible, but it would have taken a lot of time, and I would have needed constant access to him, which unfortunately was not really an option. But yeah, it absolutely would have been an option that I would have loved to be able to explore. I have done some of that with Harrison Canning, who gave his presentation, I believe, last semester, and the rest of NXT, his organization, as a former prosthetics projects lead for them. But unfortunately, it just really wasn't in the cards for a one-man project.
Sure.
But yeah.
So is your colleague Ash, has he made the costume that this is going to fit onto?
He's made a large portion of it, yes. Really, the headdress that you saw the character wearing at the beginning is he needs access to the arm in order to know how to size things and how to mount the batteries and stuff. So he hasn't designed that yet, but the rest of it he has been working on.
What a pity we're not going to be able to see the finished article at the symposium.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Really cool.
But yeah, it would have been.
All right, thanks. That was a fabulous presentation. Meg?
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, George. That was really interesting. So my question really has to do with your future plans. You've probably got a really nice arsenal of interesting projects that you can, include in a portfolio, but what is next for you?
That is a really great question. I am someone who has one of the best problems in the world, and that problem is being interested in way too many things. So I have considered one of the ones that I have most heavily considered is trying to reach out to Disney in order to essentially be an Imagineer. They've been doing a lot more robotics work recently. For example, you may have heard about the Spider-Man robot that they're using in California, which is just incredible in how simply complex it is, if that makes any sense. It's wild. I've also heavily considered starting out in like film production, essentially. A lot of film sets, whether it be for commercials or feature films or anything in between, need robotic implementations in order to get a specific shot. And that would certainly be something that I am geared towards. And then in the more analytical and technical research sense, places like the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab or MIT's Media Lab that do some just incredibly advanced work with robotic prosthetics would also be just incredibly cool to be a part of. We will see where I end up, but I think I'm luckily positioned pretty well to be able to go into a lot of different things. So we'll see.
Well, I really enjoyed that, and it'll be a trip to see where you end up and the kinds of interesting projects that you end up working on. So really nice job.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions out there for George or anybody? No? Okay. So again, if you've got a preference about us not keeping your presentation, which I hope all three of you will let us keep these because they're really fantastic, then just email me and let me know. And then obviously respond to the email that'll be coming shortly about whether or not the 28th works for you. So if you can be actively looking at that, checking that this afternoon so that you can respond right away, that would be great. And thank you in advance for your flexibility. We're just trying to be reactive and adaptive to an update that was just given to us yesterday. So really nice job. And I will say too, just how proud of you we are for doing this kind of work, such creative, imaginative, technical, socially conscious projects. So really, really nice job. And we also know that in the summer, it's a little bit of a fast and furious because you've got fewer weeks to work with. So anyhow, just really nice job. And we hope that things wrap up nicely for you all and that you'll stay connected with us if you are finishing up this summer. Stephen, anything else?
No, we'll see you. We look forward to seeing you at the symposium, and hopefully we can get everybody on the new date. So see you then. Great. All three presentations. I loved all three of them. They were fantastic.
Yeah, great job, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, straight fives.
All. Oh my Lord. When we have people like that, that's when I wish like Ellen Granberg were sitting in on this
Really?
one, because it's
Really?
just really remarkable.
Yeah, that was a fabulous session, just fabulous.
I
And
mean, yeah, those were all really, really, really good. Yeah. Okay.
Well, we've got another session at 5 o'clock, and we've only got two students, so we we should be able to keep them within the hour. It's almost 1:20, but so I mean, you hate to cut them off. I mean, I mean, you know how much work they put into it, particularly the presentation part, or for the most part, certainly these three today. So much work, and then you're going to cut them off for a sort of an arbitrary reason, just to fit them into an hour. I don't, that feels awkward to me. I much prefer to let them go.
I do too.
Yeah. All right.
All right. I'll see you later.
See you this afternoon. Bye-bye.